Miriam had just written a letter that she mailed out to about 1,000 mosques all over the United States, pleading for help, explaining that Ansar Allah was trying to minister to poor people. It was in a poor neighborhood. It had tremendous financial obligations because of government pressure. Could you please help? She tells me she got one response. And we're standing, one response. We're standing in the mosque on a Friday. The letter, she said, elicited one reply. All I can say is what happens, happens, she said to me afterwards. I've done all I can. It's in God's hands. By the time I met Mumin at Ansar Allah, Gharab had been jailed for nearly a year. No charges had been filed against him. No bond had been set. Another lawyer, Stephen Morley, had filed a habeas corpus petition to force the government to show why he was being detained. It was sitting in federal court. The mosque was stifling on one muggy day. I spoke to Miriam. She told me she didn't want to talk about the past. She was done talking. There was no point to it. I said that no one in the wider community knew what was going on at Ansar Allah. No one had any idea. I can't say anymore, she replied. 1 year and 2 months my husband's been away. 1 year and 2 months. For what? What has he done? His little girl has been born. She has begun walking. She's begun talking, and he's been away. They put him in shackles around his legs and handcuffs when I went to see him, and 2 guards standing on either side of him. What has he done? They say he was praying in the middle of the night, and they put him in isolation for 2 months. For praying. He was praying at night. Is this what he's done? By this point, Miriam had worked herself up, and the words were flowing, and she was about to burst into tears. We were standing near the bay door of the mosque after Friday prayer, and I felt like a burglar breaking into her most private affairs. She turned away from me and went into a small vestibule to compose herself. She was wearing a gray abaya. I'm sorry, she said, returning a moment later. I cannot talk about this. I begin crying. You can't understand. I told her that no one apparently wanted to talk about Ansar Allah, something I'd said to her several times in the past, because they were afraid. Yes, she said, people are afraid. All of them are terrified. I blame her. What happened afterwards, just to quickly sum up the outcome of this, was that this mosque closed. It was almost an invisible event. It was not covered by the local press, the Inquirer. The imam was deported. The imam's family was absolutely destroyed. The daughter who watched in horror as her mother and stepfather were surrounded by police in front of her school, blamed her parents, and ultimately blamed Islam. And if it weren't for Islam, none of this would have happened. When the imam was deported, her daughter, his stepdaughter, who's Miriam's child by an earlier marriage, refused to leave the country. So that presented Miriam with a horrendous choice, and she was not the only woman at Ansar Allah who had to make this very choice. Does she stay with her children in the United States, with her daughter, who refuses to leave, or does she go with her husband, who cannot stay, who must leave? What she ultimately chose to do was her sister, who was also in this country, provided a home for her daughter, and Miriam went with Sheikh Gharab to Egypt with their child that they had had together, who was an American citizen. So this family was torn apart. Sheikh Gharab was, of course, immediately taken into custody by Egyptian security and questioned for about a week or two, and they were ultimately uninterested in him. They released him, but they forbid him to engage in any religious activity whatsoever. So he was unable to to find any employment in any mosque. He returned ultimately to Alexandria, where he came from, and was forced, couldn't find a job. He was forced to move in with his elderly mother. So Miriam and their little girl moved in with Sheikh Garab and his mother. Miriam, who's a Moroccan, I say a Moroccan-born American citizen, found Egypt intolerable. It was a culture shock to the nth degree. She had a nervous breakdown. She came back to this country. I found her again just by chance. She was sleeping on a couch in a slum in Elizabeth, New Jersey, in the living room of an old friend of the Imam's. She was in the midst of a deep depression. Ultimately, she got herself together, went back to Alexandria, and ultimately had to make the decision to bring her little girl back to this country and reconcile with her older daughter. So Miriam and her 2 children are in this country. She is seeking to fight for her husband and his return here from the United States. But she's actually right now, she is the sole source of income that he has in Alexandria. So, to sum up, we have a family destroyed. I've only focused on that family, but there were about 6 families that were very similarly, utterly wrecked by this event. A mosque, a house of worship that was destroyed, in an entire congregation that lost its place of faith, and a community which is not a Muslim community, is not a Middle Eastern community, but nonetheless, I can't say it welcomed the mosque, but it appreciated the mosque because Ansar Allah provided charitable contributions to poor working families in that neighborhood without regard to religion. And children of all faiths were able to come into the open masjid every single day and play. And in a neighborhood in the middle of a dense city, old city like Philadelphia, having a safe place for your kids to play in the middle of the day is, nothing to laugh at. It's very, very important. All those things are gone, and a tight ball of suspicion was made even tighter and more ominous as a result of this. So I want to thank you. If anybody has a question or two.
Do you get it? There wasn't any evidence of terrorism. Someone made a bogus charge. But instead of investigating it and dismissing it, the authorities covered up their mistake with a flurry of arrests, imprisonments, and expulsions. And it had terrible effects for the families involved.